Meanwhile, I was at home suffering from the Omicron. It was mainly a headache.
The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 100 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. From Studio 317 at the Holiday Inn Resort, Pensacola Beach, Florida. Today's flight, Rob D and I discuss windshear on final and heavy crosswinds, high altitude go-arounds, the 5G effect on 121 operators, and we take a very special look back to some of our favorite moments from the past 99 shows of the Squawk Ident podcast. So stay with us as we complete our pre-flight for Flight 100. Before we push off the gate today, we wanted to say congratulations to a young pilot who now holds the record as the youngest female pilot to fly solo around the world. Congratulations to Zara Rutherford and her team who made this adventure possible. For those that haven't heard us talk about Zara before, we've been following her progress that she's started on this adventure back in August of 2021. And there's going to be a link in the show notes from a Washington Post article by Claire Parker, and it's dated January 21st. From that article, the 19-year-old British-Belgian aviator used her gap year after high school to break two, not one, but two Guinness World Records, becoming the first woman to circumnavigate the globe in a microlight aircraft and the youngest woman to make such a journey. American pilot Shaista Wise, the previous record holder, was 30 when she flew around the world in 2017. The youngest male record holder, Travis Ludlow, completed his solo flight around the world in July at the age of 18. When Rutherford set out on her flight, she aimed to, quote, reduce the gap from 11 years to 11 months, she wrote on her website.
At first, it wasn't a sense of adventure. I wanted to do something crazy that would change my life. And then I realized that, I would maybe get a bit more media attention than I thought I would get. So I thought, I'm going to try and use that and try and hopefully encourage girls to go into aviation and STEM, so that's in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
When she landed her Shark UL plane at Kruijswijk, Wevelgem, God, I'm sure I butchered that, I'm sorry, airport in western Belgium, after 5 months, Rutherford opened the cockpit. She stood up to greet the cheering crowd with her arms held high and a grin on her face. And she said, I made it! So she's the daughter of two pilots. She grew up around airplanes, started training for her pilot's license in high school. She had always dreamt about flying around the world, but thought it would be impossible. At least that's what she told the Washington Post. More on the article in the show notes again, but congratulations, Sarah. Absolutely inspiring. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 100 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. Well, joining us today is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Recovering from his second round of the post-triple vaccination COVID-19 infections and high atop his castle from somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, help us in welcoming our very own Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, Tony? I'm doing a lot better this week. Yeah, definitely recovering from the latest variant of the COVID-19, I guess, Omicron or whatever they call it.
Megatron.
But I'm back. I'm healthy and very excited to be here for the. This is a momentous milestone for you and the Squawk Ident podcast. Show 100. It takes a while to get to this point, and here we are. We should raise our hands like Zara did, and
we did it.
Say, "Hey, I did it."
Well, thank you, and it's definitely a joint effort. Thanks to you and Roger and Kyle for all the wonderful just help and feedback and just participating and in the conversation with me every week. It's great. And I know I say every week because in the beginning it was a weekly thing, and now it's more like a couple times a month. And that's just because the schedules have been so crazy for all of us. Even scheduling this was momentous because we were, I wanted to have everybody
it's
here.
It's like herding cats. Isn't
it really is. I wanted to have everybody here, but, obviously schedules have been just absolutely busy.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we're all busy. We all have families, and we're trying to make everything work. And sometimes it's just hard to fit in a couple hours to sit down and do the podcast because we're just we're spread thin as it is with our work schedule. So yeah, it's tough to get everybody together.
And speaking of family, I see you've been doing some more volleyball tournaments.
Oh man. It's never ending, man. Unfortunately, I fell ill at the same time that my daughters had a volleyball tournament in San Antonio. So my wife, the trooper she is, she got the kids in the car and she drove down to San Antonio, which is about a 5-hour drive here from the Dallas area. And so they drove down there and spent the weekend on the volleyball courts. And, she's trying to divide her attention between the two teams, the two girls, and then socialize afterwards. And she came back and she was just exhausted.
I bet.
I mean, she, I'm exhausted just, helping her out, doing it with her. And she did it, basically with both kids. So, wow, hands off to her. Hats off to her. She did a great job. But meanwhile, I was at home suffering from the Omicron, which, I mean, I don't know if they can really tell if it's Omicron, but I got to tell you, this round of illness wasn't as bad as it was before. I had been diagnosed with or tested for COVID back in December of 2019. And that hit me pretty hard. I mean, I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything like that, but the symptoms were pretty rough. This time around, it was mainly a headache that was the more, prominent symptom, followed by the cough and congestion. But that was pretty light. Energy level wasn't as high as it normally is. It definitely had a little bit of fatigue, but it lasted 4 days or so, and then started to feel better. And went to work the other day and had a good trip. No symptoms, feeling good. So back on the healthy side of life.
And
so
were you still able to get the paid leave from work, or did you happen to have those days off?
Yeah, I had one trip that interfered with, or one trip that I had to fly. Was supposed to fly, so the illness, they had to remove me from that trip. So got 4 days off for that trip and added another 6 days because I think it's 10 days that they have to give you off, so you don't spread it. So I was off for 10 days.
Yeah. And when did you come down with the symptoms? Was it like days after you were flying before?
Yeah. So I remember the first symptoms started. So what are we here? Yeah, I think the first symptoms started about, I got to look at my calendar here. First symptoms started on the 10th. So I think we did our podcast, on the 6th?
Yeah.
Of January? Yeah, so the first symptom was the 10th. And we had a volleyball tournament the weekend of the 8th and the 9th. And I remember sitting next to a friend of mine, at the volleyball tournament, which a friend of mine, we socialize all the time at the at these tournaments, and he's a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And on Monday, he sent me a text message saying, he didn't feel too well, and he tested himself, and he was tested positive for COVID. So he's like, just, watch your symptoms. If you feel ill, get tested. So coincidentally enough, on Monday night, I had, I wasn't feeling too well. I had the headache, and I was already at a layover in, I think it was Austin. And the next morning when I woke up, still had a little bit of a headache and started to develop a little bit of a cough.
Mm-hmm.
So we had one flight to Dallas, and they were supposed to sit like 3 hours and then go to El Paso. So when I got to Dallas, I just went and checked in with the chief pilot office and said, hey, I'm going to go home sick. I think I got, I think I got COVID. So they're like, okay, we'll remove you from the trip, and, just call us when you get tested.
Yeah.
So I went immediately and got tested on the way home, and sure enough, I tested positive.
Yeah. And how does that work? Does the chief pilot's office handle communicating with everyone you may have come in contact with, or?
Yeah, that's the primary means. I mean, if ideally what you should do is if you feel sick, call the chief pilot office and let them know that you're feeling sick, and then go home and get tested. If you're already at home, just go ahead and get tested if you're, feeling any of the symptoms. Mm-hmm. And if you test positive, call the chief pilot, tell them you tested positive. They're going to ask you to send the positive test results to an email address where they track that stuff. And with all that, they'll put in the computer your removal code,
mm-hmm.
For pay purposes and attendance and all that stuff, to remove you from any of your trips. And they give you 10 days. So it's an automatic 10 days. And then it's pretty much the same thing if you've been exposed to somebody who has tested positive, which technically, I guess I was in that situation when I was on that trip, because, the doctor had exposed me. So there's a protocol that you're supposed to follow. And there's actually a flow sheet, a flow chart to follow that's on our union's website. Mm-hmm. So it's really nicely laid out. It's step by step. So you feel any of the symptoms, go to that website. It starts asking you questions. Were you on a trip?
Yeah.
Were you at home? Were you, are you positive? Or were you exposed? So it kind of gives you a checklist of how to go about doing it. And then as you reach certain stops, it'll say, okay, call the chief pilot, or call the, pilot on duty, or call the union medical department. So they kind of set it up for you, and it's really easy to follow. So
yeah, last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, about maybe after you came down with the symptoms, mm-hmm. I remember you texting me, and I started getting a headache, and I thought nothing of it. Yep. Sinuses. This time of year, it's been extremely windy in my neck of the woods, and that means a lot of dust, a lot of pollen, and I have very severe seasonal allergies that I take regular medication for. So I thought, well, it's probably that, because I didn't have any of the typical symptoms that you have read about or heard about with COVID. I felt fine. I could eat, I could taste, I could smell. I mean, all the stuff. No fever, just a little dull headache and some sinus pressure. So I took sinus medication, and that lasted about 24 hours. And then I noticed the other members of my family started to come down with similar headache kind of thing. And I thought, uh-oh. So luckily I was home. I was off for, I think, 5 days. And I mean, the symptoms went away within 24 hours, which is not typical either. But the conversation came up when then you texted me saying, hey, I've got COVID again for the second time, and you were telling me the symptoms and headache, but you didn't lose any of the other things. I thought, oh, well, if Rob got it and his symptoms sound like my symptoms, I wonder if I got it. And I'm triple vaxxed and tested, so what the heck? So I called the chief pilot's office in Los Angeles. They said, well, you can come down to Los Angeles International Airport and get tested at no charge for employees. Just have to make an appointment at the clinic. But that's like an hour and a half drive one way. So I'm like, can I just get tested locally somewhere? And she's like, well, you can do the home test. And right now there's a website. All you have to do is just Google it. There's a website right now that you can get an at-home test courtesy of the U.S. government. You get 2 of them per household. All you have to do is fill out the form and they'll mail it to your mailbox. But of course, that's going to take some time. I took advantage of that. I sent away for my at-home test as well. But I wanted to get something. And at least I wanted to get an antibody test because I was feeling fine. And I thought, well, if I'm pretty sure I don't have it, but if I did have it, I wanted to find out. So I contacted our aeromedical group with our union over at Legacy Airlines, and they called me back and they said, yeah, absolutely, you can do what you did the last few times for the antibody test. I'll send you the order form from our doctor, and all you got to do is go into your local lab, which is a mile away from my house, and go and they take a little vial of blood. They do the antibody or antigen test, and then they get you the results. I got my results within pretty much 24 or 30 hours, something like that. I got my results back, and it said antigen test positive. And I thought, well, what does this mean? Does this mean I've had COVID? Because there was a note right under it saying that there is no scientific evidence that if you test, an antigen test comes out positive, it's from COVID or from the vaccine, because that creates an antibody response. So there's no way of testing to find out where it came from, in other words. So do you have the antibody response in your body from getting vaccinated and boosted, or do you have that response because you've contracted the actual virus? There's no way to know.
Right.
So I gave them a call back to go over the results, and of course that's exactly what they told me. So I don't think I've ever had it. However, she says, man, your antibody count or your antigen count is through the roof. She's like, if you're below 8, which is, I forget the measurement that they're using, but if you're below 8, that means you do not have antibodies. If you're above 1,200, then you're considered vaccinated. At 2,500, they stop counting. And mine was greater than 2,500. So I'm like, so I can go into a room full of people with COVID and probably not get it, huh? She's like, well, it doesn't work that way, but.
That's funny. But those symptoms you described are very similar to what I experienced. And it's also, like you said, something that I experience almost seasonally, with this time of year with the winds and that, I don't know what they call it, like desert sage or whatever. It's a pollen that's in the air. And I've been suffering from allergies my whole life. And I actually went and got on a program and took allergy shots for a number of years, which helped me out tremendously. I mean, it changed my life. I mean, I was going from, being, sitting on the couch, suffering from, allergies, not being able to function very well, to all of a sudden, I can go out and cut the grass and dust the house and get a workout in. And it's great. I mean, I don't have any problems, but I occasionally will still get a little flare up or whatever they call it. And so, when that happens, and now in this day and age with COVID-19 and Omicron, it's like, well, is it allergies, or is it, one of the symptoms of, the COVID starting to kick in. And, the loss and taste of smell for me, it happened on this round too.
Okay.
But it didn't happen until the later portion of the illness. I mean, I was actually starting to feel much better, but all of a sudden, you notice that the coffee doesn't quite taste the same, or that pizza that you just ate didn't have the flavor that you were craving. And so, so now I do a couple of little tests to make sure that I'm still alive. So, I go sniff a bottle of of perfume or cologne, and I'm like, oh, I can't smell that anymore. Or, take a sniff of bleach or something like that. I'm like, oh, I can't smell that either.
I don't recommend that,
Okay,
ladies and gentlemen. Do not sniff bleach.
Well, just you got to do some tests because, I don't know, it's something just to be aware of because, I live in a house that has gas appliances and stuff like that. And, kids sometimes get a little careless around the stove when they're making things and they don't turn off the burners properly. And, I want to make sure that, my senses are, if they're affected, that I, pay a little closer attention to stuff like that. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, good.
Here we are. I'm alive.
I'm glad you're
healthy
better.
and well.
And thank you for sharing your experience with us. I think it will help. It just goes to show that these symptoms could be extremely mild. My aeromedical doctor that called me back, I had a conversation with her. She said that probably the reason, if you contract COVID or this new Omicron, the reason that people are getting a much more mild case with the symptoms is because most of those people are vaccinated. The virus is, yes, a little bit less potent, or not potent, a little less symptoms, like severe symptoms, but it's much more potent. It's easier to catch. But because you're vaccinated, that's what they're believing is the reason why it's not lasting as long, and it's being a much easier thing to recover from. So, by all means, learn to recognize those symptoms, take the appropriate actions, do what you can to isolate if that's the case until you know. And with these free at-home tests, I mean, there's no reason why you can't pop one of those. I think it's a saliva test.
Right.
You get the one stripe or two stripes, kind of like a pregnancy test. Wow. Yeah. I believe that the Squawk Ident podcast was on to this a year and a half ago, and Roger was making fun of us because he said, I think it doesn't work that way, bro. But here we are. So anyway,
that's funny.
But yeah, I'm so glad that you're feeling better. And Texas, I was in a 30-hour layover last week in Texas. And the day before, I looked at the weather because I was packing for the trip, and it said 72 degrees. And I thought, awesome. So it was only a 2-day trip. So I packed like a sweatshirt, but just a pretty light packing because I only packed for 2 days. And I get there and it's 34 degrees. And I'm like, what the?
I remember that day.
Oh, I was in Fort Worth, and I put on everything I had in my suitcase just to go and grab a bite to eat.
Oh man, that's the weather here is crazy, man. I mean, obviously, there's areas of the country that experience a lot worse weather.
Yeah.
But that I remember that day, and we've had numerous days like that where it'll be 70, 80 degrees, and then a cold front comes in, and then you're in the 20s, and you're going from shorts to breaking out, the earmuffs and the gloves, the scarf and the long johns and everything like that. It's pretty crazy. And then the winds kick up. I mean, we're going to talk about that today, and it gets crazy, man.
Yep.
I tell you what, dang it, that boy ain't right now because my narrow urethra and all. Dang it, Piggy.
Gosh darn it.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Windshear. Show 100. So excited. Thank you, Rob, for being here. Thank you, all you listeners out there as well, for all the support over the last few years. Every year, January 1st marks the beginning of a new season for us. And so this is season 4. I don't know if you've noticed, but the last show 99, highlighted a new introduction song. I make the music, or most of the music, I should say, for the podcast. Occasionally, I put some background music, some royalty-free background music in there when I'm highlighting a story or something. But the introduction and the outro music I made on GarageBand. And this year, for this season, as I'm getting my skill set in check here, I decided to add some sound bites from some of our favorite aviation films. So at the end of the show, I'll play again in its entirety the season 4 music for the Squawk Ident podcast. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know. Send me some feedback. Let me know what you think. That would be fantastic. But today we're going to talk about windshear. Why? Because I experienced some pretty bad horizontal wind shear. Now, in your private pilot training, student pilot training, you're going to get into weather systems, and they talk everything about clouds, visibility, lenticular clouds, which you stay away from over mountaintops, right? They talk about vertical wind shear, which is the stuff that happens at critical phase of flight when you're close to the ground, and all of a sudden you can have a microburst or downdraft. Wind shear is just a sudden change in direction of wind from one direction to another. So it could be horizontal, it could be vertical, it could be diagonal, it could be anything. A lot of times with airline and jet traffic, we're dealing with horizontal wind shear over at related to the jet stream up at high altitudes. Now, this particular instance that happened to me just this last week was a horizontal wind shear at a relatively low altitude. The winds were howling in Southern California last week. We're talking 50 to 80 mile an hour gusts. And yes, my house, the north side of my house, has been sandblasted, ladies and gentlemen. We had...
I was going to say, a lot of people also in the training world associate wind shear with thunderstorms or microburst activity. And that's not necessarily the case. You know, it could be a frontal system moving through, like probably the situation that you're talking about now, where, you know, it's very strong, and, you know, the isobars are close together, and you know, the pressure gradient's really extreme. So yeah, you can experience like you said, the change in wind direction or speed, and you know, and it changes rapidly, especially descending or climbing through the layers. So yeah, so as you go on and tell the story, you know, keep in mind that this stuff doesn't always happen around a thunderstorm. I mean, obviously it happens around the thunderstorm, and that's right. That's very important to know that too. But you know, like a gust front, or not even a gust front, a frontal system could you know, cause this stuff, which that's what happens around here quite often.
Yeah,
this time
for
of year.
sure, especially, you know, out in the plains states, we definitely see a lot of these wind shear events. Sometimes that's how you get tornadoes too. Frontal boundaries that are definitely conflicting, hot air, cold air mixing. But in this situation, it was the same day I was there in Dallas. It was very cold, and I was wearing everything I could put on. That afternoon or that evening, we headed back to the airport, and we did DFW to Denver, which was cold, but it wasn't too bad. Then Denver back to DFW, and we swapped airplanes. We had a little bit of a sit, and then DFW to Ontario. And we were looking at the weather before. When you're doing your pre-flight, the typical pre-flight for a first officer at Legacy Airlines is, you know, you get to the airplane, you're going to do a kind of a global assessment of the exterior of the aircraft and a detailed pre-flight. On the pre-flight, I didn't find anything wrong with the aircraft. Everything looked good. Got back into the airplane, started to build my nest. Is what they say, you know. So you're in your little nest there, and you like everything in a certain place. You know, it takes time for a pilot to get their nest set up the way they like it. And once you figure that out, it's pretty quick to like put my iPad here, or put my notes here, or put my pen here. So I got my nest set up, and immediately I download the flight plan, the weather, the routing on the Jepson charts that I need, the WSI information, and then I start. I have a piece of paper. I use scratch paper instead of throwing it away or recycling. I always have a little pocket in my kit bag where I keep all the scratch paper. Most of the time, they're old flight plans. Occasionally, I'll fly with a captain who likes to still print out a flight plan. And I always say, hey, but don't throw that out when you're done with it. Can I have it? I use it for scratch paper because it's only printed on one side. So that's what I do. And so I write my little notes, you know, and I put, you know, the flight number and all the pertinent information we're going to need for the flight. And I'm sitting there, and I always check the weather. You know, obviously, I need the ATIS for where we are, so I can program the flight management system. But I also would like to get the weather at our destination, so I know what runway they're using. And that's what I did. Right. And I looked at it, And I can remember there was a pause, and I went, whoa. The captain was like, what? He goes, did you see the winds in Ontario? 010 at 33 gust 49. Horizontal wind shear.
Holy mackerel.
Plus or minus 40 knot gain and loss on final reported by. Yeah, it was howling. And I thought, oh God, what's the TAF? Let's look at the terminal area forecast. So we looked at the TAF, and the TAF indicated it wasn't going to get much better for at least 10 hours. And I thought, holy crap. Captain's like, yeah, we might not be landing in Ontario today. I was like, I got to get home. I've got an appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning. This is go home late. And I only brought 2 days. I mean, everything went just spinning in my mind. And so we took off, we kept a close eye on the weather. We were communicating with dispatch periodically. It's a relatively short flight. So it's about an hour and 20, hour and 30-minute flight. It's not very long, in that direction. With the higher winds, it was a little longer that day. So as we're transitioning from Albuquerque Center to Los Angeles Center, they started telling us, start looking at alternates because no one has landed in Ontario for over 2 hours because of the winds. And I'm thinking, I'm feeling lucky. I know tonight's my night. It's going to happen. We're to stay positive. Let's not get negative. So we're looking at our alternate. It was not Los Angeles. It was not Palm Springs.
Where was it?
It was Phoenix, Arizona. So I send a message to dispatch. I'm like, Cap, do you mind if I ask if we can maybe get Los Angeles? Because we can freaking Uber home from there or something. The passengers can take a...
People are landing probably in LA.
Right. Well, LA winds were strong too, but not nearly as strong. And so we sent a message to dispatch saying, hey, can we please put Los Angeles as an alternate? And they said, no, Los Angeles is full. I'm like, what do you mean it's full? It's full. We have no more gate space at Los Angeles. Everyone has diverted to Los Angeles. So luck of the draw, because we were the last flight of the night, scheduled to land at 11:50 p.m., that just wasn't going to happen. So we requested speed our discretion. We slowed it way back, giving it time to see what the winds were doing. And the winds were exceeding our limitation on the aircraft, on the Airbus A321 of 35 knot crosswind. Under dry conditions, 35 is the max. So at this point, every time I was checking the ATIS, with the wind gusts, the crosswind was over 40 knots. Plus, they were reporting the wind shear situation. So we were prepared that if this wasn't going to work out, we're just going to punch out of there, go back to Phoenix. Well, at first the captain just didn't want to even try. He's like, why are we even bothering? There's no way. I'm like, well, the book says you can't land in knots more than 35 knots crosswind. And you can't operate, land, take off, or taxi with winds speeds over 50 knots.
50, yeah.
And they were gusting a 49. So we had a couple, if not 3 factors that were in play. Excess of 50 knots was possible. Crosswind limitation was definitely an issue. And wind shear, which is extremely dangerous. Now, this wasn't a microburst situation, wind shear, but it was horizontal wind shear, which can cause your airspeed to significantly drop or increase rapidly. We do have wind shear avoidance in the aircraft, but with 5G being an issue at some of these airports, that could affect the wind shear technology with the radar altimeter, radio altimeter. So that was also something that we were talking about and considering. So we walked through it and we decided, you know what, let's at least attempt the approach. And we'll get wind check at 1,000 feet. If the approach is unstable, dangerous, or any of us feel uncomfortable at 1,000 feet, we'll punch out. If we get a wind check and the winds are acceptable, and if we feel it's safe, we both agree, we'll continue. and we'll get another wind check at 200 feet. And if at 200 feet everything seems stable, then we'll try to land the aircraft. If not, we'll just punch out. We won't bother. We'll just go straight to our alternate. So we had the plan set in place.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and this is important, listeners, is to have a plan. You never want to just show up at an airport and wing it, so to speak. Like Tony and his captain did. You sit there and you think out all the scenarios and talk about when and how you're going to approach this airport, and what are you going to do in certain situations. And this is what we refer to as a threat forward briefing. Here we are, what's the threat going forward from here? And this is something that hopefully a lot of you are incorporating into your planning and decision making.
Yeah. I mean, because we're all pretty quick on our feet, but we both have to be on the same page. And if we've discussed it already, there is no question of what the next step is. There is no question of what you're supposed to do on a go around, because you're hammered into it, right? Positive rate, gear up, all that stuff, right? So you're doing these memory items. Yep. So when you're in a situation like this, like Rob was saying, you have to have this plan of attack. Now, there's a second thing that I learned many, many years ago from another captain that I was flying with back in my Sandpiper days. We had a very similar situation going into Detroit, and I know I've talked about this on a previous show, I think a couple of years ago. What he taught me is what I implemented on this very flight. I wrote down through the land app crosswind calculator, I plugged in a bunch of numbers. If the winds are 010 on the runway 8 left, which is what we were using, what's the maximum amount of wind from what direction that I can hear that the controller is telling me that puts us within the legal limits? So I wrote down like 010, the winds can be no more than this. At 020, the winds can be no more than this. At 030, and so on and so forth. So I made 4 calculations from 4 different possible wind directions, and I wrote down the maximum gust winds that could be announced, and we would be then legal. So that if the tower then gives me a wind speed and direction at 500 feet, 1,000 feet, or 200 feet, whatever it is, I'm not doing math in my head. It's either below or above this number that I've pre-calculated, written on my little notepad or note paper that I had right in front of me on my tray table. Sorry, you Boeing guys. So I had it all there, and sure enough, we never even got that far. At 4,000 feet on the downwind leg, the winds were 020 at 85 knots. Yes, we were flying on a 45-degree crab. We're pointing.
Isn't that incredible?
We were pointed at the airport and flying that downwind leg. It was pretty cool, but also relatively intimidating. Now, we turned base to final, airport in sight. Obviously, on a high wind day, you're going to have great visibility. And knowing that the preceding aircraft that attempted this in front of us, a Delta airplane, they did a go around at 1,000 feet. They had a wind shear plus or minus 20 knots, and they did a go around, and they busted out and they went to their alternate. So we were anticipating this. Well, at 4,000 feet, turning base to final, cleared the visual, autopilot on, getting configured, almost completely configured, at 4,000 feet, getting ready to intercept the localizer and glide path. We got a plus or minus, which actually was a minus, 40 knots. The trend vector for the speed went through the floor of the cockpit. It just, the captain immediately responded.
Isn't it incredible to listen to the motor, the engines, when this is all happening, and they're going from idle to like full thrust, and you're just like, geez, this is crazy.
I felt the acceleration in my seat. I was pushed into the back of my seat. And even though we were at 4,000 feet, which is plenty above the ground level on a heading, the captain's reaction was what most people do, because that's what's ingrained in us in the simulator, in the training events. Because in the training event, in the sim, you're always doing the go around at the worst possible time, which is at your DA, decision altitude.
All right.
Low to the ground, 200 feet off the deck, and you're doing a go-around, right? So you go through your litany of memory procedures and flows. So go around toga set, go around flaps to whatever,
Left.
3.
Or
Sure.
whatever.
And then positive rate, gear up. And then if you're doing the procedure, you make sure that the guidance is there. If not, if ATC gave you a heading or altitude, you make sure you plug that in. It is asses and elbows for at least 30 seconds until everything gets settled and, you get back. When you're at altitude, though, in level flight, experiencing a windshear event like that, what is the proper response? How often do you practice this? My captain elected to go to toga. He saw the trend vector of the speed, and he was like, toga.
Right.
Go around toga. So as soon as he went go around toga, what does the flight director do? Pitches up.
Goes into the go
goes
around
to
mode.
the 100% thrust. So we were assigned an altitude to intercept the localizer to descend, and now the airplane's climbing. So again, this was an asses and elbows. Now, luckily, I mean, between the two of us, we were able to not overspeed the aircraft, not overspeed the flaps, not bust the altitude, but it got ugly really quick because the airplane wanted to climb, and he was going around toga, and I said, toga set 4,000, and he's climbing. He's like, he's starting to pitch up, and then he goes, go around flaps, and I'm like, your speed's a little low. I went, hold on, altitude, and I pulled his altitude, and I went, try to maintain 4,000. We don't need toga. Go climb. He goes, oh yeah, okay, climb. So he pulls it back to climb. Okay, so
because you're kind of in between, like 3 different procedures, which is, just a kind of a cancel your go around, maintain your altitude. You're responding to a wind shear event, which there's obviously a pretty different procedure for a wind shear, and then you're also executing it shouldn't be called to go around because you aren't really going around, you're just canceling your approach clearance, but you're still executing a go around. You know what I mean? So I mean, there's 3 different things happening, and there's 3 different procedures to handle the same way. So this can get all bobbled up in a heartbeat.
And I think the reaction that could have been better was he reacted to the trend vector and not the airspeed.
Right, the actual
airspeed, we were fine. We had a buffer between the...
Because the trend vector gives you, I think, 10 seconds, tells you where your airspeed's going to be in 10 seconds. Right. So, you have plenty of time to respond if you respond to it.
So, I mean, we were able to, and then that triggered a response from him when I said, go to climb, because you're going to overspeed your flaps. So he goes, oh. So then that woke him up to kind of, because he was in the middle of 3 different procedures, it kind of woke him up to the fact that, okay, we have plenty of altitude. We're now speeding up rapidly. And I don't want to bust this altitude because we were given an altitude. There could be traffic above or below us. So he immediately got back down. We didn't bust an altitude. We didn't bust the speed on overspeed or underspeed. And that triggered, okay, now we're getting back in the game. And I made the response to ATC. They gave us maintain 4,000, fly 090. What do you want to do? And I'm like, stand by. Because remember, communicate is the last thing you want to do. Aviate, navigate, communicate. So first I got us a clearance to not continue and level off. Then I was back in the game with my captain, and we cleaned up the airplane. We picked it up to start, get back up to 250 knots and get all cleaned up. And that's what we did. We ran. I did a little flow of a checklist, an after takeoff checklist kind of thing, because now we had to make sure we're configured and everything is back. Speed brakes were disarmed, all that stuff, right? So that happened, and we were climbing out, and they said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And it's like, "Well, we're going to go to our alternate, Phoenix." They're like, "You don't want to go to LA?" I'm like, "Oh, operations said that LA's full." He goes, "Oh, yeah, I can understand that." He goes, "Okay, fly this heading. Can you file?" I said, "Excuse me, it's filed as our alternate. Phoenix is filed as our alternate. Like, yeah, can you contact company? And because I don't have anything for the routing. I'm like, well, just give us something real quick. So he did. He gave us something. I wrote it down. I plugged it in the computer real quick. He got the autopilot back on so that, I could be heads down for a moment. And we ended up going all the way to Phoenix. Landed at Phoenix at 2:00 in the morning. You know, and so we were done. We had 3 legs that day. We were done. We turned into pumpkins, and they put us up in a hotel. I slept for a couple hours and then just hopped on a flight on my own and came home. And I had some appointments I had to keep. But it was an experience that had me thinking how we always train the worst case scenario for a go around to be at low altitude. But when you're, like you said, canceling an approach clearance, there's no reason to do this Jackie Chan reaction of, what I go around?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
All you have to do is kind of just get the wheels spinning up, let them spool up a little bit, get that, get thrust. Now, we were also, like you said, dealing with wind shear. And so
you never actually got a wind shear caution or warning. So going into toga would not trigger the wind shear go around.
No.
What do they call it?
Program the escape procedure program, right? Yeah. So it's something to think about if you find yourself in a situation that you're plenty of altitude above the ground, more than 1,500 feet above the ground, and you experience a trend vector that starts to die on you. Yeah, react, obviously. And I think in all, it was a positive outcome for us because we were both quick-witted enough to make sure that we didn't get into a situation that maybe oversped the airplane. The opposite could have been true, where the reaction wasn't timely enough to where it did get into a situation where we got slow enough to stall or a stick shaker or something like that, and then you're really in a pickle.
Yeah, that's pretty good work there. I mean, obviously the outcome was successful and everybody's safe, and we could sit here and talk about it. And that's the point of the whole the whole job and the whole conversation. Let me ask you, so how was ATC during your actual go around? Did you announce go around or right away? Because what I find is, ATC can be a distracting factor in your procedure, because they're sitting there hollering altitudes and headings and all these other frequencies for you when you're just trying to get the airplane where you need it to go and clean it up and not overspeed and all that other stuff. So how was that during the whole procedure?
Yeah, I think it worked out pretty good because since we were at altitude, ATC had no idea what we were doing at the onset. Now, we were the ones that were monitoring the speed and trend vector and said, "Oh, we recognized the loss of airspeed, reacted extremely quickly, and the outcome was fine, but." Because the reaction was so just kind of like without thinking, it was just like one of those gut reactions of going into toga. And then, obviously following the command bars, which is an immediate climb. Because of that, I had to initiate that ATC response immediately so that they could possibly give us relief from our previous clearance, which was to intercept the localizer and fly a visual. And so they were like, okay. And then, they were talking, and I told them, hold on a second, and that's when we got the airplane cleaned up and on speed and everything settled. And then I got back to them saying, okay, our intent is to go to Phoenix. Now, once you do the initial go-around call, the ATC is going to give you a heading and an altitude, and sometimes you don't have time to read it back.
Yeah, exactly.
You just got to go through your flow to aviate that aircraft.
Yeah, aviate, navigate, communicate. That's the 3 priorities. And that's what I'm kind of getting at is sometimes ATC will be quick to give you all those instructions, not taking into consideration what you're going through in the cockpit, especially during this high workload environment that you just entered into. You're trying to execute the plan that you talked about probably 20 minutes ago, approaching the airport, and making sure that you and your co-pilot there are working as a team and and not fumbling things up like you briefed it. and in the meantime trying to make sure that ATC knows what you're doing, but you you need them to kind of hold back a little bit until you can get the airplane configured and have enough brain cells and CPU memory to follow their instructions. Because when you're going through 50 million things, just trying to read back a heading or an altitude can be complicated. You know what I mean? So yeah, good job, man. That's shit hot work over there.
Oh, thank you. So we've been very busy with the communications at work. We've been getting emails, it seems like almost every few hours, about this 5G implementation.
Man. It's tiring.
And I mean, you had an experience that you had the FAA on your jump seat just recently. And there was an interesting comment that they made. What can you tell us about that?
So yesterday I worked a flight from St. Louis to Dallas, and we had an FAA inspector on board, and he oversees Legacy Airlines 737 program. And the conversation, the dark horse in the room was the 5G stuff that's been very popular in the news. And so we turned around and asked them, and we said, hey, what do you know about the 5G issue that's been going on with the aviation industry? And he's like, y'all know probably as much as I do. All this stuff has developed in the last couple of weeks. It is something that is a continuously changing environment for us, and to be honest with you, it a lot of the decision making is way at the higher levels of the government, between the FAA and the communications FCC. Federal Communications FCC. What does FCC stand for? Federal Communications
Commission, I think.
Commission. Okay, thank you. Wow, I should know that. But anyway, and he said the procedures and the AMOC stuff that's being handed down is really stuff that we're just passing along from the higher levels of the FAA. And so a lot of the stuff that they've been talking about, he says, are just theoretically what could happen to an airplane's systems, which these are things that haven't been tested yet, and that's the big problem. And he said, as far as how to handle it and everything, is like the best thing that we can do at this point is just make everybody fly at Cat 1 minimums, which does not use a radio altimeter for the minimums as far as like visibility and approach criteria. So but there are definitely other systems that are affected by the radio altimeter system. So that's why there's still a lot of other limitations that are being imposed on operators when they're flying into these airports that are nodemed by 5G. So so a lot of the communications have been about what would happen or how to handle or what to look out for when you're operating into and out of these airports. I could go on into detail with a lot of other with like the 737, since I've used to fly that airplane. I mean, obviously I may get a couple things messed up, but we could talk about it. And obviously we could talk about Airbus stuff too. So
yeah, I think the gist of it is that we're referring to the 5G antennas that telecom companies are now broadcasting from. So all around your neighborhood, you'll see these cellular antennas, right? And they could be on towers, they could be on the side of buildings. And there's a new bandwidth that is being used. It's called the C-band. We've talked about this on the previous show. And the C-band operates under a specific frequency that is very close to the frequency used in aircraft on their radio altimeters. A radio altimeter is a bandwidth radio frequency that is transmitted, usually from somewhere around the nose of the aircraft, straight down.
Yeah.
And
I understand like the upper limits, the upper bandwidth of the radio altimeter actually overlaps the lower end limit of the 5G technology, and that's where the conflict exists.
Yeah. So to understand what's happening with airline operators, all you have to do is look up the AD 2021-23-12. In other words, Airworthiness Directive that came out on the 23rd of December of 2021. The FAA published this AD for all transport and commuter aircraft equipped with a radio altimeter. This AD requires revisions to occur to the limitations chapters of the Aircraft Operating Manual, or AOMs, of these operators, prohibiting certain operations that require radio altimeter data when in the presence of 5G C-band interference at airports identified by the 5G NOTAM, or Notices to Air Missions. In compliance, each of Legacy Airlines' AOM limitations chapters have been updated with the AD guidance to include the following limitations. When operating in U.S. airspace, the following operations requiring radio altimeters are prohibited in the presence of the 5G NOTAM, unless you qualify under the AMOC, or alternate method of compliance. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So I'm going to take a look at this, advisory circular that we got in our bag of tricks, in our kit bag. And it indicates that first thing you have to do as an operator, as a pilot, is determine whether or not the 5G NOTAM is published for your airport. The one thing I like is some of the airports that I've flown into this last week says right on the ATIS, this airport has been recognized as a 5G interference airport. So you know right then and there.
Yes.
You don't have to look digging through your flight release to find this. Although,
and that's something I brought up to the FAA inspector yesterday, is that portion of the dissemination of the information is not standardized. Obviously, it's in the NOTAMs,
right,
which is the Notice to Air Missions, right. Being woke now. But it's very important, being a new NOTAM, that they put this on the ATIS.
Yes.
They need to do that. And I told them, I said, what's on an ATIS all the time? Bird and advisories in the vicinity of the airport.
BIV, baby.
As aviators, we know that. We don't need to hear that anymore.
That's legalese, buddy.
It goes without saying, right?
Yeah. That's for the lawyers.
Let's put the 5G NOTAMs on every ATIS.
Yeah.
Let's get that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
like,
that
right.
Birds in the vicinity. That's legalese, man. That's only for the lawyers, so that when you hit a bird, they go, well, were you notified that there are birds in the vicinity of the airport? Oh, I never heard of that before.
Exactly.
It wasn't in the ATIS, sir.
And I think that is a question that's on the on the bird strike form that you fill out electronically now.
Absolutely.
Was it on the ATIS?
Was it?
Come on,
was
it.
Yeah, because it's on that form, it's now on the ATIS.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
exactly.
So we have to figure out if this is a 5G airport. Now, immediately, as soon as you go into your JEP app and you put in your flight number and it pulls up the routing and the information in the airports, all you have to do is go to the destination airport, hit on the 10.9 page or the taxi diagram. On the bottom, there's a little NOTAM button. You push the NOTAM button and you just scroll through there and it'll tell you right there. You don't have to go digging through your flight release for it, but it's also there in a flight release.
And they made it easy for us. Yeah.
So that's the number one. Now, if you're going to an airport and a 5G NOTAM is not published for that airport, all of this doesn't matter. You operate normally without restrictions. Right. Fantastic.
Right.
If you are operating at an airport that has a 5G NOTAM and you're flying an airplane with a radio altimeter and you have the capability of doing less than a Cat 1 approach or Cat 2, Cat 3, or an RNAV, RNP, then you have to take a look at this. And what it's saying is you should review the F4 messages for, at least for Legacy, that's what they call them, for the alternate method of compliance, or the AMOC. and that is runway specific. So you have to make sure that the runway of intended use and your aircraft are compliant. Now, like I said, we have been getting emails and notifications a couple times a day. First, the 737s were AMOC compliant because they determined that the radio altimeters on that fleet did not have any signs of issues with the 5G C-band stuff. Then we got an email saying, okay, Airbus people, the Airbus that have sharklets are using a radio altimeter that is also not shown any signs of deviation. Therefore, you are now AMOC compliant on that fleet. And then late last night, we finally got the other non-sharklet Airbus fleet that was using a different radio altimeter. They finally got approval. So now what happens is if you are operating an aircraft using runways included in the AMOC, then you operate normally without restrictions. So again, even if you're landing at a 5G airport,
it still tells you that you need to look out for interference.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
But if you're operating an aircraft using runways that are not included in this list of the AOC runways, then you have these affected systems that you have to take a look out for, and you can't do possibly Cat 2, Cat 3 approaches or RMP approaches. Now, Rob, you were saying that you still have to monitor some systems, even though you can conduct operations normally. You can do the Cat 3 auto land. The affected systems, it's a pretty long list of stuff. The radio altimeter height indication on the PFDs may be inconsistent, accompanied by untimely RA callouts. Additionally, there may be abrupt decreases in height or erratic RA height indications. So that's one thing to look out for. You could get an untimely minimums call or call out. In which case, if you can see the runway environment visually, then you can continue. If you can't and you get an untimely minimums call, then you got to do go around. Auto land warning light may flash if you're doing a Cat 3 auto land inappropriately. The ground reference on the PFD, the altitude scale, may be erroneous. The brown ground, the indication that we have on the PFD. Also, during initial climb, you expect to have takeoff inhibit to terminate normally on the engine warning display to takeoff inhibit. To normally terminates around 1,500 feet. That silences, the takeoff inhibition silences nuisance warnings, right? That things that are not critical.
Cautions, I think.
Yeah, things that are not critical. And then after 1,500 feet, then anything that may have popped up will pop up because you're in a critical phase of takeoff or landing as well. During takeoff, you expect nav to engage normally. Nav usually engages at 30 feet RA or 5 seconds after takeoff if the RA fails. So the nav annunciation on your PFD, on your annunciator panel there, could potentially erroneously either not indicate or indicate too soon. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, you can get the famous Airbus retard, right? When you're in the flare phase and the aircraft says 50, 40, 10, retard, and that tells you to retard the throttles, right? Well, that could be untimely, and an error it could tell you to retard at 100 feet. That's not good. So use your head, on this. So there's so many systems that include the land, the flare, the throttle idle, indicators, localizer capture, stuff.
And that's just on the Airbus. I know on the 737, the low visibility operations, they use the HUD on the left side, and whenever the runway visual range RVR is less than 1600 RVR, the captain has to perform the takeoff, and the captain uses a HUD on the takeoff. And looking through the HUD is, presents a whole bunch of information. One of the information that he receives is pitch cues and flare cues for landing. So and that all is written reference to the radio altimeter. So the interference can cause premature or inaccurate flare cues and tail strike cues in the HUD for the captain landing or taking off the airplane. So that could potentially cause an accident or an incident, which is obviously something you don't want. And then, and all the other stuff that you talked about are definitely a huge factor on the 737 as well. So yeah, it can be a pretty big deal. But then the big question too is why, Europe is doing it already. They already have 5G and all that stuff. Yeah. And why aren't they having issues? That's a good question to ask, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why are we having these issues and not Europe?
Yeah, and from what was explained to me, but I have not read it anywhere yet, is that their 5G over in Europe and in Asia have a different frequency, different bandwidth. That's possible.
Well,
I don't know
possible. Well, the FAA inspector told me, so that they did brief him on this. He told me that they did do a better job in testing the equipment before it went live. And one of the things that they determined that was the perfect, or not perfect, but that was a solution for this whole thing, was to not have the antennas aimed at the ILS, antennas or areas around the airport, have them directly aimed in the environment that the aircraft are operating into and out of, and also change the direction and the intensity of the antennas so that they're just not interfering with the instruments and stuff of an aircraft, and all that was already handled before it went live. He said that when the wireless companies went to the FCC and applied for the permits to do all this stuff, it never went through the FAA's channel until late in the process. So when they got the approval from the FCC to design, or not so much design, they already had the design already in place, that whenever the wireless companies got the approval to do the projects, they just went ahead and constructed their sites based upon the approval that they received from the FCC, which did not include the testing from the FAA side of the house. So so they just went ahead, and that's their big fight right now, was like, we already received approval to do this. We spent millions and trillions of dollars. I don't know how much money they spent on it, but certainly millions, possibly billions of dollars, constructing and putting together this network. We're ready to flip the switch on and make money on it, and you guys are stopping us from doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is funny you say that, because I was smiling because I've been flying airplanes for over 20 years. And from the beginning, I've always been told that the FCC and the FAA have had this feud going on. They don't like each other. They don't talk to each other. I don't know how true this is, but it totally makes sense, because every few years you hear a story about the FCC thumbing their nose at the FAA.
Yeah. I can go on a tangent on any of these topics right now. I mean, let's, just for example, without going too crazy, let's just look at the latest incident with the gentleman that came over from London, and he was a known, and he just committed murder here he not committed murder. He held a rabbi and a few people's hostage here in Colleyville, Texas. It made national news. He's basically a known terrorist, and he made it into the country. And this all happened while I was sick and in COVID, so I was watching news and all that stuff. But the government agency, he was on a no-fly list. He was not even supposed to be able to fly.
How the hell?
From wherever he was to the United States. But because the agencies don't talk to one another, guess where he ended up?
Yeah.
Here in the middle of Texas. And
Jeez.
yeah. So anyway, I there's obviously a lot more detail that I don't know, but how did he get here?
Yeah. And that's,
we have all of these restrictions in place, but it goes to show you the communications problem that we have within our big government agencies.
Yeah.
It seems like either it's not my job, or we didn't hear about it, or that information has been redacted, so we don't know.
Right.
So anyway, whatever. Let's move on.
That tells me it's a good time to take a quick break, and we'll be right back right after a word from our sponsors.
Good time.
Captain, how soon can you land? I can't tell. You can tell me, I'm a doctor. No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, you get me going on that stuff, man. and the crazy thing is, I don't know half the thing that I'm, half the detail about it, because there's so much to it. And I read about it a long time ago, but it's just big government stuff that it's driving me nuts lately.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my gosh.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. Well, we've been having fantastic conversations about windshear and 5G and go-arounds and all this stuff. And now we want to take a moment and celebrate the fact that this is the 100th flight, the 100th show of the Squawk Ident podcast. And, it's been a fantastic journey to be on this journey with all of you. I went back and was listening to some of our favorite podcasts from the past, some of our favorite episodes. And, those first episodes,
yeah,
I sounded like I was.
Oh, you learn and you grow, man. That's how it is.
Balls. And do you like my sweaty balls? Oh, they're fantastic.
Yeah, that is cool.
But I gotta say, it was pretty nostalgic. It was kind of cool. But I've been asking now for quite some time, what are your favorite episodes? And a few of our listeners have responded. The consensus is that they really enjoy the episodes where we had our firsts. My first episode, the first time you were on the show, the first time Roger was on the show, and the first time Kyle was on the show. So we definitely took a listen to those. And what I did is I went back and I just took some short clips from past episodes. And what I'd like to do is just take a walk back and just remember some of the funnier and maybe more creative moments on the show. This is a clip from Flight 1, Hooked on Flying is the name of the clip. Let's take a listen.
When I decided to get on this adventure of flying, I was making pretty good money, living in New Mexico at the time, working for this big box retailer, and my wife bought me a Discovery flight. So she said, every time an airplane passes, you stop the car, you look up, and you're telling me what kind of airplane it is, and why don't you just follow your dreams? Since you were a child, you wanted to be a pilot. So why didn't you follow it? And I had to explain that, my family really thought it was a little expensive and a little dangerous. I can remember, my parents asking me, Tony, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, always a pilot. I want to be a pilot. And, my mom right away, no. You cannot be a pilot. It's too dangerous. And man, I was like, oh, come on. I want to be a pilot. And no. It's too expensive. We cannot afford. And so, I love my mother to death. And the truth is she thought it was a dangerous thing. She wanted her son to have both feet planted on the earth at all times, unless, we were taking the trip to Italy to go see family or something. But this was the reality. And so I always kind of put that on the back burner, that I was interested. It was a passion, but, it just really was not something that I felt was obtainable. And it wasn't until I met my wife that she said, that's absolute bullshit. You should never allow anyone to discourage you to follow your dreams. And it was her doing, her purchase of this Discovery flight that got me just knee deep into this passion. So she buys this Discovery flight, and I can remember a friend of mine, my roommate from college, came along. He was visiting us from Los Angeles. We were in Albuquerque at the time. And she says, no, you take your friend up and let's get up there and just enjoy yourself. And who knows, maybe you might want to do this as a hobby. So we show up to this appointment, and here comes the flight instructor. Tall, good-looking Italian guy who comes right up to me, sticks out his hand, shakes my hand, and says, "Ciao, my name is Luca. I will be your flight instructor. We're going to go up and have a good time." And I immediately started talking to him in Italian. And his eyes just lit up, and a big smile, and we just got along swimmingly from the get-go. So we went up into the pattern, did the couple touch and goes. He let me have command of the aircraft, and he was explaining how to turn, coordinated turns. And by the time we landed and taxied in, I can remember that my smile was ear to ear, my teeth out, grinning, just the happiest I had been in so long. And I caught the bug, the aviation bug that you hear of. So I decided that it was fate that here this paisan from Italy who was here to build time so that he can go back to Italy and get a job so he could be with his family. And I happened to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico because of my previous employer and the direction I was going with that. And here we are meeting. So I said, man, I really have to try this. I'm going to try to get my private pilot license. I really don't know much about it, but I'm going to start to study and get into it. And before you know it, I had my private pilot license in hand. My first passenger was my wife. We went up and we toured some of the beautiful mesas in the Albuquerque area and tried to stay away from some of those beautiful clouds. We often joke around that the sky in Albuquerque is a lot like the sky in the Simpsons cartoons. It's just perfect all the time, with the backdrop of the Sandia Mountains at sunset, and they just turn this beautiful watermelon red. It just was a wonderful place to learn how to fly. So from that, I progressed forward with a little bit of instrument lessons and instrument instruction. And then a tragic event happened in the United States, 9/11.
I listened back to this very first episode where I explained this, and I thought, and
that's part of learning, man. That was a good story you told. You're trying to convey your, excitement and passion into words, and try to communicate that to the listener. And it can be a little bit challenging at first when you're haven't done this before. And I know I still do it. I know I stumble and stutter, and I can never think of the right word or phrase to come up with. I've never been good at that to begin with.
Yeah.
So
But I got to admit, though, from the first few times you were on the podcast with me today, you've come out of your shell, and you do that less. And Roger too. I was talking the other day to my wife, and she's like, Roger's really changed. He laughs and jokes around with you on the podcast. And, at the beginning, he was just sitting there going,
yeah, it's fun. Yeah. It's fun.
Oh, we love you, Roger. Yeah. This next clip is one of my favorites as well, one of our favorites. Roger's first time on the podcast. Now, I had a very intricate, by intricate I mean simple, studio at the time. I first was getting into podcasting. This was my 8th episode here, Flight 8. This was where Roger came to my house, and we sat there in the studio He sat on the sofa across from me. I had a microphone on him. I had the microphone on myself. I had this new fancy Zoom recorder that I was using, and we just sat there and had a conversation in the room. And he told us about his experience flying a Beech 99 over Show Low, and when a 7 to 8 pound bird went through his windscreen and created quite a commotion. Let's listen in on the first time Roger told us about his ordeal over Show Low. And then just about 10 years, a little bit over 10 years ago today, something major happened to you. And I remember when you called me, did you call me from the hospital or just after you got out of the hospital? Or, I mean, what happened?
I could not answer that question. Who I called when at what point? It's kind of a little hazy. There might have been some drugs involved there.
Yep. Well, from the KOLD news in Arizona, about 10 years ago, and I'm going to let you kind of get into the details, but they said there that it was smooth flying for a pilot over the skies of Arizona until a bird came crashing through the front windshield of his twin-engine cargo plane. The impact left a bloody mess in the cockpit and forced an emergency landing in Show Low. The impact shattered the pilot's side windscreen. The pilot is our very own Roger, suffered minor cuts and bruises to his face and splattered bird parts across the inside of the aircraft. This is what Ian Gregor of the FAA spokesperson indicated to the journalist that was writing the article. That was Dan Marys of KOLD News. But when I read that, and after talking to you, there's such a disconnect of what really happened. And I mean, that just sounds like, oh, a bird went through the window and oh yeah, okay. But what, I mean, give it to us. Let me hear it. What, in your words, I remember you telling me about it, and you woke up that morning, you're running a little bit behind schedule. You didn't get your contacts in, so you threw your glasses on and you just made it to the airport on time, and it was a beautiful day to fly, right?
You know, the most succinct way to put it, I thought I was going to die. I honestly thought it was all over. You know, doing the job that I did, we had early morning flying. And so I would typically have to be at the airport around 5 o'clock in the morning or so. And we would launch between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, and then we'd come back later in the evening. But this one was a departure from Phoenix International Airport. It was 10 years ago, about to the day. Launched typical November day out of Phoenix, clear, cool. Was flying about 120 mile, I think, flight or so from Phoenix out to Show Low. It had been uneventful. And I had just started the descent into Show Low Airport, which is an uncontrolled field, no tower. I was not talking to air traffic control or anyone at that point. I had just made a call on the CTAF, the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, letting the airport and the airport environment and anyone else in the area know, where I was coming from, about 20 miles out to the west. And then it was like a bomb had gone off in the airplane. I did not know what happened. As it was, I had made that call on the traffic frequency, and another airplane had just departed, and he was headed back towards Phoenix. He was climbing through 8,500 feet or something. I was descending at 11,000 feet. We were separated by about 20 miles, but when you're at about 11,000 feet, what do you hit? You hit airplanes. And so, initially, I had no idea what had happened. I thought I must have hit this other airplane. I remember just kind of thinking, it's over. This is how it's going to end. And I remember looking out the right window, thinking, just expecting to see the ground hurtling towards me. And how my wife was going to be upset that I died without telling her. And it's amazing how fast your brain works. I can tell this story that can take, 10 minutes. And in reality, all these thoughts are going through my mind in split seconds. But I looked out the window and it looked normal. And then I worked my way from the right side of the airplane, and I came across to the instrument stack, and all of the instruments were reading the same just like they should. And then I kept moving from the instruments, and then I got to the front windscreen right in front of me, and there was a big gaping hole at the top portion of the windscreen, and the rest of it was completely opaque from the glass shattering. And I saw a tuft of feathers that got caught kind of right where the windscreen was and the fuselage of the airplane. And that's when it hit me and it clicked. Oh, okay, I must have hit a bird. And then all of a sudden, after that realization, that's when things started. I realized I was hurt. There was blood everywhere. I remember at that point, my head hurt, and I put my hand up to my head, and I thought half my head was gone. It was just a warm, bloody, matted mess on my head. My hand was covered in blood. There was glass and blood all over the place. Like you had mentioned, it was a 5 o'clock, we had a 5 o'clock show at the airport in the morning, and I didn't always put my contacts in. And this particular morning, I had put my glasses on, and my glasses were gone. I had no idea where my glasses were. It was loud as all get out. My headset was gone. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, okay, well, that operation and a lot of 135 cargo operations, it's single pilot. And I was myself. And I remember I distinctly remember sitting there after all this had happened and thinking to myself, well, Roger, there's nobody else here. You better fly the damn plane. And that's when the adrenaline started kicking in. And, I think looking back on it, that I'm pretty proud of myself for doing the things that I did. After landing is kind of a different story, but, there I was. We didn't have GPS in those airplanes. We didn't have autopilot in those airplanes. And so I was flying along, hurt with a terrible headache. I wasn't sure how much blood was, how much was the birds.
Right. I mean, that's amazing. Just, you kept it together the whole time. You kind of reasoned through it logically. You kept it together. And so you couldn't see forward. How did you land the airplane?
Well, by the time I got to landing, it was okay. By the time I actually figured out where I was, I found the airport within an ADF and an NDB. And I ended up kind of winding up on a 45 to a right downwind entry. And that was all okay, because at that point, when you're flying, and I was in a right traffic pattern, you're looking out the right side of the airplane. And it was about 500 feet after I was on final that things kind of started to go sideways again. That's when I kind of lost a little bit of the visual, but you still have the front right windscreen. And you get to the ground, the more you can see out of all the other windows. I was a little worried. I remember getting close to touchdown, and I balked at it a little bit, and I pulled back on the yoke, and I didn't add any power. And again, that's one of those things that I distinctly remember going through my mind. And it was, what, Roger? So it's going to be better the next time you do this? And I took the power levers and I pulled it back to the stop, and I pitched back, and then I just waited. And I touched down. That the stall warning horn did go off. I would touch down a little bit left of center line. And at that point I knew it was over. And that's when that release of adrenaline happened. And I was on landing rollout, and I just started bawling. And things kind of got I kind of lost a little bit of my focus at that point after getting the plane to the ramp, mostly because I knew at that point that I was going to live. Because up until that point, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen.
Yeah. And you were able not only to
get the airplane off the runway, but you continued your taxi to the tie down. Is that right?
I continued the taxi to the ramp. As it turned out, I parked the plane someplace different than I thought I had. And then I also couldn't for the life of me figure out how I was supposed to turn the airplane off. I remember there was a firefighters outside, waiting for me to emerge because, they saw this big gaping hole. But all I remember thinking is, oh, well, I'm gonna kill the firefighters because I can't figure out how to turn the airplane off.
Oh my God.
It was kind of a mess after landing. But up until that point, when people ask about emergencies and how you're going to respond, I've now had that experience that even in an emergency, like I have full confidence that I will be able to at least keep my cool because I've lived.
Yeah.
I've done it. I thought I was going to die. There was nobody else there. I was not like I could talk to anybody else. My headset was gone. I mean, I have no communications. I'm injured. 18 stitches in my head. There's blood, glass. I can't see, and I kept it together. And I think that's the most important thing. In the end, I think that's the most important thing is just being able to keep your cool so that you can at least be able to logically think through some of the things that, do happen in airplanes from time to time.
Wow. Our Captain Roger, he's very modest and he doesn't even like talking about his experience that much anymore because he feels like, well, okay, that was his one thing. It's over. It's time to move on. But man, to hear that interview, to have him share that with us and knowing him all these years, I can't say enough how proud I am.
That's truly an amazing,
what a pilot,
string of events that happened to a genuinely nice guy, and thankful for his training and he has such a good head on his shoulder. He was able to create a successful outcome to what would have been in most situations a deadly situation. So he's an awesome guy. An amazing situation that he's now walked away from and is able to talk about it and share his experience and his expertise. And here he is flying big corporate airplanes now, and he has that under his belt. And I'm sure if another situation arises, he'll be the right person in the left or right seat to get him through it.
What he said there towards the end of that interview, I think, was absolutely crucial. He was able to keep his head on straight, and he was able to make the decisions and go through what he needed to do in order to have, at that point, the best possible outcome, which is get the airplane on the ground, get it shut down, get it, get the help that he needed from rescue. And my hat's off to him, man. He kept his head on and did a fantastic job. One of my favorite interviews to date. Yeah. But I have another favorite interview from an individual who told me about an experience he had when he entered the 9G Club. Do you know this guy?
Oh, this story sounds familiar.
Yeah, from Flight 19.
Let's listen to it.
This is the first time we heard from our very own Rob D.
A lot less stressful than as being a mechanic. So that's how I got into flying.
Now, I remember you telling me about that ride. That was kind of not a usual thing, was it? To get a ride in back of an F-16.
Yeah, most people don't realize, or most people don't know that in the Air Force, the officers are the individuals that actually fly the airplanes, and they take the aircraft into war zones and stuff like that. And the enlisted guys are, if it's a cargo plane or a large aircraft, they would be like the personnel crew on board, support crew, but still the officers would fly it. But on a fighter airplane, it's only the officers that take that airplane it's a battle. So me being a crew chief, I'd launch the airplane from my base, and I'd stay at the base, and the airplane would go out and fly its mission, and then it'd return, and then that's when I'd perform all the maintenance on the airplane. So getting a ride in an F-16 was kind of a rare occasion for an enlisted person, and they did do it, and they did give people rides, but there was certain, you'd either have to be, you'd probably have to receive an award or a medal, or recognized by your superiors as a superior airman. And for me, probably a long discussion somewhere else, but I was a professional racquetball player, and I represented the Air Force in inter-service championships. And so I had won the championship inter-service at that time, and that's one of the things that I got recommended for, and recognized for, and so they gave me a ride in the F-16.
So from racquetball champion to riding in the back of an F-16 trainer.
That's it, man. It was crazy.
That's amazing. So, and
it was amazing.
Of course, here's what I think most of the listeners are going to want to know. You got to ride in the back. And I know that pilot probably showed you at least a taste of what the F-16 can do. Did you have the bag and did you use it?
Well, that's funny. Let me tell you, he gave me 3 tastes, 3 bags. It was, and I later found out that there was a bet or a challenge on how quick and how many bags the pilot could get out of me.
Nice.
And the reason why was a lot of the pilots that were in my squadron were guys I played racquetball with for fun and for practice. So I'd whoop up on them on the racquetball court. So I was in their element. I mean, they were on my court, in my element on the court. So now I was in their element.
Payback time.
So payback time. So yeah, they put it to me.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the 9.2 G club. So
oh my, really?
That's crazy.
9.2 Gs.
9.2 Gs.
And you didn't black out?
Oh yeah, I blacked out a couple times trying to get to 9.2 Gs. The G forces experienced on those airplanes are incredible, and they teach you the I forget the name of the maneuver. I think it's Valsavic maneuver, or it's a hic sound you make to force all your blood, keep it in the upper extremities, and tighten your abs and your legs and stuff like that. Well, it's a technique, and it's something you have to practice. And when they load up the airplane, the onset of the G forces, you really have to time it just right, because those G forces can come up, skyrocket extremely quick.
Sure.
And if you don't hit it just right, you may not get that, keep the blood up So
yeah,
you get the tunnel vision really quick, and then everything goes black, and
man,
it's not fun.
No, and I've experienced tunnel vision during flight training. Nothing in a jet powered fighter or anything, but yeah, it is not fun. And for those of you that are listening that are going through flight training or thinking about it, part of the training that at least every flight instructor has to go through is they have to experience spin training, and they have to then be able to teach it once they have candidates that are up to the point where it's not just a demonstration as it would be with a private pilot license, but now with the instrument rating or a flight instructor rating, I believe you have to actually demonstrate and teach. So I remember being in a 152, an acrobatic 152 over the northwest side of Phoenix near Luke Air Force Base there in the training center, training area. And I can remember, I did fine. I don't get sea legs or seasick at all. I don't get motion sickness or car sickness. I'm a roller coaster kind of guy. And I can remember during that training, there was I forget what they call it. The death spiral is the not so common term, but yeah, I can remember I could see that tunnel vision happening where it's just kind of closing in on you, this darkness, blurriness coming in. And
Yeah.
You know, I never blacked out because obviously how many G's can that thing pull? You know, maybe 2, 2.5, 3, I don't know. But I can only imagine 9 G's. Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to all the military pilots out there and the rigors of their training that they have to go through. It really gives you a sense of appreciation. I'm sure you can attest to. The 5G man.
9G.
Aha. The 9G man.
Come on, you got to get that right. 5Gs isn't nothing compared to 9Gs.
Well, we've been talking about 5Gs all day today.
5G. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe people think that, hey, 5G, that's not so bad. I pulled
Just
9.
wait until 9G, buddy.
What's the big deal?
So yeah, no,
isn't that crazy to listen to?
It's
that?
a fantastic story. And doesn't it feel like a million years ago?
It sure does.
Episode.
Yeah. When was that actually? That was
January 19th, 2020.
Wow.
So a year.
That's crazy.
A year. That's not that long ago when we first started this.
Was it 2020?
Yeah, I started the podcast in November of 2019. Yeah, it's 100 episodes in
2 years ago. Then almost 2 years.
2 years.
Year and a half.
2 years. Yeah, we're in 2022.
Yeah.
Right.
This 2022 thing is screwing with my head.
I know, right?
Because 1 year we just lost because of COVID. I mean, you don't even blink it out. I think it was most of 2020. So, last year was 21, and that flew by.
Yeah.
But yeah, wow.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
2 years ago, we started this adventure together,
Yeah.
and it's been fantastic to have you on the show, Rob. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for always inviting me back, because I know when I don't get the invitation or the text message, hey, when are you going to join the next one? It's probably when I've worn out my welcome here on the podcast.
Well, according to our listeners, you and Roger and even Kyle are definitely a part of the landscape here. So yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen. And on our show, we're all about the journey of today's aviator, how they became pilots. What are the struggles they went through? What are the hurdles they had to overcome? Because when listening to these interviews of these fantastic aviators that I've had the privilege to get on the show and have discussions with all of you, with them, I'm always amazed on how the stories are always the same but unique. And one of my favorite interviews was with a captain that I had some flight training with. We were doing a simulator event for our recurrent training over at Legacy Airlines. We met each other, we hit it off, had great conversation, and I thought, man, this guy's got a great voice for radio, for podcasting. And his experiences were phenomenal. Tomcat driver, Top Gun school graduate. This guy, if I would have met him 10 or 15, 20 years earlier, I would have been like, oh my God, you're my hero. Because that was everything that I thought was the tip of the spear. And it was a privilege and an honor to speak with Captain Paul from episode 54, Tomcats, Top Gun, and Recurrent Sims. Here's just a little bit about how Paul was telling us how he performed a single engine approach and landing on the USS Independence.
Will to win, these are the things that endure.
Is it?
Coach of the pack. Yeah, it says,
Okay, coach. So you ended up transitioning finally to the F-14. I mean, any aviator since the turn of the century that grew up watching films, particular films, which I'm not going to even, insult you by mentioning, particular Tom Cruise films. But I mean, that's right. I watched that movie
did it come out in
1986,
I think.
Something like that, yeah. So
it did.
Yeah, I watched it 1,000 times, dreamt, sit there in my grandpa's chaise lounger with a couple rolling pins and pretending I was a pilot. And, I mean, who hasn't gone through that experience? Well, maybe there's a younger that's out there that maybe doesn't even know about that movie. But as a pilot, so I gotta ask you, you were on board an aircraft carrier.
You were telling me that you were on the USS Independence, had some amazing stories to tell. You were in theater.
Yeah.
But you told me one story that blew my mind.
Yeah, we were, this was back in the 1990, the end of 1990, when Saddam first invaded Kuwait. So they sent our carrier through the Straits of Hormuz, I think it is, or Hormuz. Anyway, to be kind of on station to take care of any, to, kind of show the American flag and show our military presence out there in the Persian Gulf. So we were out there for 110 days straight. I mean, normally in the Navy, if you're on an aircraft carrier, you tool around out in the middle of whatever big body of water, whether the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, whatever ocean you're in. But normally, you're out there maybe 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and then you're going to get a port call. So everybody has a little R&R to blow off some steam. But due to a potential conflict, we were out there for 110 days straight, and it was trying at times. Flying out there in the Persian Gulf, and a lot of times we would, we had CNN or whatever. This is before CNN became fake news and actually was trusted. Sorry, you might want to edit that out.
No, that's great stuff right there.
Keep it.
It's truth.
Yeah. So we would in the ready room, we watched CNN because every day was different. Like, what's going on today? Oh, we're still going out and flying CAP, Combat Air Patrol, and in these sectors because we just didn't know, is the war going to break out tomorrow? So we just kind of kept doing our thing and kept flying our missions. And there was one kind of mission we're out there flying, and it became kind of something that was more than extraordinary. So anyway, we're out there flying. I forget what it was, a 2v2 against my section and a group of Hornets or something. We're just out there practicing. And at the end of it, we're like, all right, it's time to recover, head back to the ship. So my wingman and he was a junior pilot. So he was, at the time, I had already spent 2 or 3 years, almost 3 years flying the F-14. So I had about 1,200 hours in it. So I was relatively experienced and going against a relatively inexperienced guy out there dog fighting. So it's a neutral start. And then after a couple of turns, I was on his tail and I was getting ready to gun him. So anyway, and then all of a sudden, I had a compressor stall on my right engine. I'm like, I look down, the EGT, the TIT, whatever it was, it's going hot. So I'm like, oh man. So I coordinated with my RIO. We shut down the right engine, and then I knocked off the dogfight, had my wingman join up on the right side. And I was like, all right, we went through the book and went through the procedures, and it was like, all right, if the engine cools down, you can try and relight it again. So we tried to relight it again, and immediately my wingman saw all this fuel coming out of the right side of my airplane, which later on we determined after maintenance looked at it was a afterburner fuel pump that had ruptured. So all this gas was coming out the right side. We're like, well, that's not good. So I immediately shut it back down again and committed myself to, I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm bringing this thing aboard the ship, single engine. So it's one of those things that you always practice. And Tony, like we do, and Roger and Rob, I mean, you get in the sim, you're always like, what's the worst thing? Well, one of them is a single engine. It's like, all right, how do we operate if you're used to flying with 2 or 3 engines and now you're down to 1? It's like, all right.
Yeah. So
kind of it gets sporty at that point. So anyway, so I'm out there and I, I'm on 1 engine now, and I was able to kind of focus. And it's funny how for me at least, I think the adrenaline starts kicking in and everything kind of became crystal clear, and your brain is able to look at the instruments and just instantly determine, and you just stay way more on top of stuff. Like you're fully wide awake at that point. You know that you've got something that's critical, and it takes all of your attention to detail to try and solve this problem. So I remember that as being a distinct feeling in my head where I'm like, wow, this is like, it's really, it was kicking in. So anyway, brought the airplane back, flew a really, flew a nice pass, luckily. OK 3-wire and rolling out in the wires, and I hear the radio. There's my call sign was Lance, and the skipper of the ship, his call sign was Gun Train. So I hear Lance 207 Gun Train. I'm like, that's the skipper of the ship. So I'm in the wires on the deck of the carrier, and I look up at the island. And I see this big kind of overweight, heavyset, captain of the ship looking down at me. He's got the phone to his ear. I said, I keyed the mic and said, "Go ahead, sir." And he said, "Nice job, son." I was like, yes. And then Tony, the instructor for our sim, he was the younger brother of the CO of Gun Train that we had.
Wow.
Talk about small world.
Small world.
Yes. Because
No kidding.
last week we're going through the sim, and he knew that I was a Navy guy and flew F-14. So I could see behind his medical mask that his eyes started kind of widening. He's like, "What ship were you on?" "Well, I was on the Independence." He's like, "What year?" He's like, "Oh, like 89 to 91. "Do you know my brother?" And so I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm his younger brother." Oh, that's where I recognized the name.
Wow.
So he was, it brought back, and he loved that story. And, so it's it's kind of, aviation is a small world. We've all heard that.
Oh, it so is.
Sure
and I've been
is.
saying this and toting that line for 20 years since I got into it.
Yeah.
It's a small world. You never know that, it is insignificant as a moment can be that you think while you're in it. That flight attendant that just got pissed at you because you didn't listen to him or her could be your chief pilot in a few years. I mean, completely different, same field, but different, section of it, different department.
Yeah.
But you never know. You don't burn bridges in this industry.
Yes.
And it's moments like that where you really see this industry through a monocle. It's like, oh man, that's really tiny, really sharp. And what a small
And that
world.
was 30 years ago. So, the whole don't burn bridges where it's not just like from a couple years ago. You never know when you might run into somebody, no matter how long your aviation career might be.
Yeah, can you imagine?
That's a good story. Man.
Good job, son.
Oh man, that's coming down from basically, the earthly god of the Navy. That's the captain of the ship. I mean, he is like the man. So to get that, immediately raining down, this, earthly godly voice coming over the radio from the the bridge. That's it's got to make you feel good.
Yeah, I mean, you already know all eyes are on you. This is an emergency situation on a ship. Everyone's on, clear the deck. Here comes an emergency aircraft, and everyone's watching the cameras. But to know that the HMFIC is looking down on you and gives you that vote of confidence. Oh, amazing. And an amazing storyteller.
Yeah,
Captain
totally.
Paul, thank you so much from Flight 54. If you haven't heard it, go back, check it out. This is episode 100 of the Squawk Ident podcast. We have only a few left of these fantastic flashback clips. One of my favorite, and I think I have to say all of us here at Squawk Ident feel that this is one of our favorites. It's a little bit lighter side of the interview process. We interviewed a captain whose claim to fame started years ago on this website called the YouTubes. I don't know if you've heard of it, the YouTubes. Yeah. And he talks about how he and the chief over there, Louis, have started this airline called Speed Tape Air. And we were able to get him on the show. It was one of we had the most fun laughing.
It was an entertaining one. I like this one.
And to meet Bozo online, at least, was a really was a real treat.
Yeah.
And here is just a little clip from Flight 59 the puppet master.
Like, please take me to your show. I can be a character like Bubba J. Please.
Well, you are quite the character, Captain, let me tell you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And so you mentioned you live in a suitcase. Any preference on the name brand quality of establishment that you have for your mobile home?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad you asked because what Bozo keeps me in is his original case that he bought over almost 10 years ago now.
Oh,
get out.
Yeah.
And it's still around?
It's still around. So look, it's a luggage works, right?
Oh, they last forever.
They last forever. So you're asking about brands and things. Luggage works, if you want durability and longevity, luggage works. But man, that Travel Pro interior is plush.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like Egyptian cotton.
You know, but what I don't like about the Travel Pro is that the wheels, they don't use bearings. At least on the Travel Pros that I've ever owned, they use just a metal shaft with a plastic or rubber grommet on these wheels, and they wear out. You got to have the bearing, right?
Yeah. You got to put the ABEC 5 bearings in the luggage works. That thing just glides across the concourse. You know what I mean? It's like you're just barely pushing it. It's going.
You know which ones
I think in the 10 years we changed out the wheels once.
Well, you know, I meant to mention that, you know, years of being based in and out of Chicago, you know, pulling my luggage works bag through the snow and everything, I was going through bearings twice a year on my bag, which is one of the main reasons I went to Luggage Works. That and the fact that the thing is a tank with its exterior metal frame. Well, the bearings kept getting rusted out because I, you know, wouldn't take it all apart after pulling the bag through snow. So I decided to go with ceramic bearings. So you can order ceramic bearings online, and they have a tendency to not decay and rust out as much as the traditional metal or stainless steel bearing. So just a little tidbit for those listeners out there that may be dealing with these kind of issues. If you buy a overnight bag, spend the money, get a good one. The Luggage Works brand is a great brand. I actually have Strong Bags. Strong Bag is a great brand of suitcases as well. It has a aluminum interior that's covered with fabric, so there's no frame on the outside. It's a little less tank looking and a little lighter, but the same with the wheels with the bearings. And I haven't had a need to replace the bearings yet, but if I do, I'll go with the ceramic ones instead. Cool. So yeah, food for thought.
Yeah. No, he finally swapped them out like 3 years ago. The ride got so much smoother with the new wheels.
Wow. I was going to say, if for you, Captain, it's probably like a mobile home for you, isn't it? You live in that thing, you're getting pulled around all the time, you know, and then if you send the thing in to get refurbished, it's like getting a whole new interior, you know, redone.
It did. It's like living in a mobile home when your friend keeps dumping dirty laundry on your couch. That's what it is.
That might be a little tough to have.
So we got a system going here. Clean clothes go in the main bag. Dirty clothes go in the side pockets. If the side pockets fill up, they got to use the other exterior pockets before they come inside.
So I guess you can only go about 4 days before you have to like trade everything out again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
4 days or 5. We can stretch it to 5.
Okay.
I'm not an unreasonable puppet. You know, we could stretch it to 5, but after 5, he's paying the damn money to go to that coin slotted whatever laundry machine they got.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. God forbid you get extended or, you know, stranded at your last overnight. Then you got to go 5 or 6 days. Oh man.
Well, you know, you got the people who do the inside out underwear stuff, and I don't understand that.
Yeah. Forward to backwards, and then inside out forward and inside out backwards. That's 4 days.
Yeah, why would you do that? That's what coffee machines are for. Seriously.
You know, it's hard to do now because the hotels got smart and they no longer have coffee makers with the basket, you know, and the filter and everything. Now they got these little cups or these little, you know, fancy Nespresso ones. And so it's kind of hard to put your dirty drawers in there just to give them a good steam.
Learn to adapt. You can shove them in. Shove them in there.
Just get them in there.
Where there's a will, there's a way, damn it.
The first time I heard that, I can't tell you, I don't think I had coffee out of a hotel room for months.
I was saying, in the military, I learned to fold my shirts into like little 6-inch squares. So I'm sure a piece of underwear, you fold it correctly, you can get that thing perfect.
Yeah. Also brews a pretty good cup of coffee.
I'm sure now I'm going to get some feedback about this topic. So let's move on.
Oh, it's one of the hot button ones.
Oh my God, that was Captain Roger Victor, ladies and gentlemen.
Man, he's hilarious, man.
We had, I think we were, even Roger was dying, crying, listening to that. Oh, it was so good.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So not every episode has always been so, lighthearted and fun and tongue in cheek and laughing. And some episodes I'm very, very proud to say have been nothing less than very informative. We were approached by a gentleman, Mr. David W., who reached out and said, "Hey, I'd love to be on your show and talk about the Human Intervention Motivation Study Program for alcohol abuse, or the HIMSS program that is designed for aviation, for pilots. You don't have to be an airline pilot to be part of the HIMSS program. It is there to help you with drug and alcohol problems." And he went through the program and he wanted to tell his story to maybe reach out and spread the word and maybe help just one person. I was so moved by this that we had him on the show right away, and he joined us from Eagleville, Tennessee, and he told us his story and how the HIMSS program saved his life. This is from Flight 61, entitled Realities of Recovery.
Just the 6 months check. We did ours in the sim. We did one with a check airman, and then we did one in the sim. And I was paired up with a gentleman who was also a drinker, and we stayed at the hotel at the I call the Homeboy Suites there in Dallas, Texas. And the Homeboy Suites they got free drinks from 5 to 7 every day, Monday through Thursday. And that was our warm up. 2 hours of drinking, then dinner, and then because we didn't have to study for recurrent back then, man. We were in the airplane for so long, you just did it, right? Yeah. Well, I went to the sim the next morning, hammered. All right, I made him drive. I couldn't drive. I was so hungover and so drunk I couldn't drive. I went into that check ride. We did it back then with the oral first and then to get into sim.
Yeah.
I passed that check ride into oral with flying colors like it was nothing. Now, think about what that did to my alcoholic brain.
Oh, boy.
It's another step. See, You were so bad, you shouldn't even been walked out of the room, but you still did it. You still went out there and flew a perfect check ride.
Yeah.
The instructor told me, because that's one of the best check rides I've ever seen.
Oh, boy.
So I said, oh, no. And we drove back. We were done at noon. Guess where we went?
To celebrate.
Right to the bar. Yeah.
Yeah. And so fast forward about a week and a half, I went back to work. I met up with a friend of mine in a hotel in New York. We drank all night. The next morning, I wake up like I'm calling sick. That's what I said to myself. I'm going to call sick. And something in my head said, "No, man, just get up and take a shower. You'll be okay." So I got up and took a shower. I got out of the shower, man. I feel like crap. No, man. Tell you what. Why don't you go ahead and shave and brush your teeth, pop in a mint, see how you feel. So I shaved. I did all that. And no, I think I should just call sick. And then it said again, "Hey, why don't you put your uniform on? You'll be okay. You've done this 1,000,000 times." So I put my uniform on, got my stuff, walked out of the door, walked down, got into the elevator, went downstairs to the lobby. As I was walking out of the elevator, I tripped over the stairs and I tripped over nothing in the elevators and almost fell down like a drunk because I was drunk. Wow. I turned around, got back in the elevator, called sick, scared to death that somebody had seen me because that lobby was full of pilots. So I went and hid in my room for about 2 hours. And what any alcoholic does, I went and found a bar. And I sat there all day. Yeah. And then I came home petrified that somebody had seen me. I was going to get caught. And I had this the one thing that was missing from my life showed up. God showed up for me. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm either going to kill myself, because I was to the point of, I was suicidal. You know, I was thinking about it. So you're suicidal if you even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't do this anymore. And I had a good friend of mine that had went through the HIMSS program at the fractional, and he was working for a legacy carrier now. And he had been talking to me for about 1.5 years about going to get help. He knew I needed help. He's an alcoholic. I couldn't bullshit. I couldn't get anything over on him.
Yeah.
And I called him up and sat in my bathroom one night and said, I can't do this anymore, Michael. I need help. He goes, great. Stay on the line. He goes, great. I'll call you back in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, he had me a bed in a rehab center in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Thank God for him.
Friend.
Yeah, because he's really in touch with the HIMSS program. And so my wife and I jumped in the car. I can laugh about this now, but I had a 9-pack of pints. You know, those pints in the aluminum cans?
Yeah.
And I had a half a bottle of vodka, and I took it with me and drank it on the way to Knoxville.
One last hurrah.
Well, we're going to do this. Might as well go out swinging.
Yeah, that's it.
Go down swinging.
You know, my last beer was sitting in our truck. My wife was sitting over there outside smoking a cigarette with the attendee that was going to check me in, waiting on me to finish my beers. And that was my last beer. So as I walked into rehab, and was there for 30 days, you know, but
wow. Yeah,
that's how the drinking went for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's one story that's my story. That's how I just couldn't do it. And I mentioned God because that's what.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And the rehab, the fact that you mentioned, you said, well, I found God and that was it. And I just said, that's it. I need help. And you reached out to the right person, you know, thank goodness for that.
Well, let's it's not really, I didn't really find God because I wasn't looking. I wasn't looking for God. Is that I had nowhere else. I was just standing there totally lost, totally miserable, totally, you know, didn't know what to do. And I felt the presence of something, right?
Yeah.
And some people, you know, God is not their thing. That's fine. It was something other than myself.
Mm-hmm.
And but he is a big part of my recovery now.
Yeah.
That was just a nudge, you know, the nudge to get me going there. So, and it was amazing though. It was an amazing feeling. Even that, I can still remember the whole thing of standing there. So when I said, I need help, it's just like a lot of things just melted away immediately.
Is that almost like, and I've heard people say this before, is that at that point, when you admit that you need the help, does it feel like just tons of weight are now lifted from your shoulders because you've admitted? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, well, you don't have to live the lie anymore.
Yeah,
you don't have to lie to yourself. You don't have to lie. I never had to lie to my wife or my parents or my friends. They all knew I was a drinker.
Yeah.
Right. But it's the fact of lying to myself that I had this, that I could control this. You know, the fact that I am completely and totally 100% incapable of controlling my alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
You know, I'm allergic to alcohol because once I have one, I want it all.
Yeah.
Because that's my problem is most companies have the employee assistance program. You know, that you can call
EAP. Sure.
EAP, right?
Yeah.
Well, I called the EAP 5 times, and each time they told me that I might be an alcoholic, and I kept saying, "Oh, you guys are full of crap." You know, and the one time the EAP was right. This older lady, really sweet woman, said, "David," she goes, "I want you to do this. I want you to get 8 minis out of the airplane." So I told her all about where I got my liquor on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't get all on the road for the airplane. I bought a lot of it myself too, but you know. But
there was a free opportunity right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it said, "Geez, I want you to drink 5 of them and leave 3 of them in your bag tonight, and call me back when you leave them in there." Well, I tried that 4 times, and I always drink all 8 of them.
Yeah.
You know,
You couldn't stop.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
Right. But the thing, that's one thing I would stress with the employee assistance program. The people you talk to there, they don't know anything about the HIMSS program.
Okay.
And they can steer you down the wrong path. And they're trying to do good. They're not bad people. I'm not talking down about the AP program whatsoever. It's that they're not HIMSS trained. And they really could lead you down the wrong path. That's why the HIMSS program is there, and why the union's there.
So let's talk a little bit about the HIMSS program. You know, we've mentioned it before on the show. We've had a HIMSS director on the show. If you go back and listen, as an episode called "A Journey of Giving Back," wonderful episode. I learned a lot at that interview about HIMSS, the Human Intervention Motivation Study. It's specifically for commercial pilots and coordinates the identification, the treatment, and the return to the cockpit for impaired aviators.
That's an amazing story, man.
Yeah, I can't believe, even listening to that again, you know, a year and a half later, I can't believe just how candid he was with us, David. David has reached out multiple times since then. He's doing great. He's 747 FO for a big cargo company. He's turned his life around, and he shared his story with us. And if you listen to the whole entire episode, he says it without reservation of what happened to him, what he went through, what he put others through, in an effort to save another, to save a pilot, to save their certificate, to save a life. His honesty was intoxicating, and I am so honored.
Good choice of words too.
He
intoxicating.
I probably shouldn't.
No, but in seriousness, you know, it takes a lot of courage to to get on a platform like a podcast and tell your story, and obviously it's in the interest to help other pilots, you know, who may be dealing with the same set of circumstances. And you know, I wish him all the best, and you know, sounds like he's turned his life around and definitely on the right path. And so it's good to hear that he's still doing well.
Yeah, very, very much so. And you know, we've had these serious shows, but we've also had shows that really highlight what we are all about here at Squawk Ident. We are about spreading the word about what it's like to be a professional airline pilot, to be a professional commercial pilot, to be a professional jet pilot, whatever it is. And all the things that I wish I knew when I was first starting in this industry, when I was putzing around in a Cessna 172 around the Arizona skies, you know, learning how to fly. And I just had this dream of being an airline pilot that I've had since I was a little kid. And I was making that reality come true, but I really didn't understand the gravity of what it took to be an airline pilot, and the realities of the days in and days out of flying. And it really all comes down to who is your mentor, who is your leader, who is your teacher, who is your instructor. They don't necessarily need to be all the same person.
Right.
And I met an individual flying on the line out here at Legacy Airlines. We met once flying, and then months later we ended up doing a recurrent training session together. That's when we really kind of got to know each other, and I've flown with him a handful of times since then. He is what I would consider a friend, a dear friend. He is an amazing person. I kind of look at him as my mentor in a way. He's had a long, fruitful career in aviation, both in the Navy and at Legacy Airlines. And he really is all about giving back. and his passion for giving back, for being a mentor, has inspired me to try to give back as well. We've had him on the show 3 times now. And who I'm talking about is Captain Elmore. Now, Captain Elmore has done some fantastic things for his community, for our community. Currently, he is back in training for his Ironman training cycle. And
that training, not the work training.
Yeah, like physical training.
The real training.
So proud of him. He's coming up on, I think it's his 60th birthday coming up.
Amazing.
So yeah,
amazing.
So proud of Kevin. This is from Flight 73. It was the second time he was on the show, and I asked him a few questions about leadership and giving back and how important that was to him. Let's listen in.
You were telling me last night that you think everyone who has the ability should mentor. Why do you feel that way?
I mean, if you think about it, it's the only way you can influence the future. You can go back and you can grab however many people you can grab and show them, not just in aviation, but in life, what it takes to be successful. What they need, what skill set they need to be what they want to be. I have a young lady that's working in a hospital, and I think she's in Utah, and she sent me a private message about getting into the military physician's assistant program. And I said, oh my gosh, you'd be a great candidate. You were a water polo player in high school. You played water polo in college. You've been working in the health industry for many years now. Be a perfect candidate. So I wrote her a letter of recommendation to submit to the Air Force. Mm-hmm. All she needed to do was get accepted into a PA program, which she since has done that. So she's going to go get her PA degree on the Air Force dime and become a second lieutenant, or actually I think she goes in as a captain in the Air Force.
Nice.
And I get a chance to pin her captain's bars on and make her a commissioned officer in the Air Force. And so that feeling, that ability to help people matriculate and become productive citizens, I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? I mean, I think everybody should do it. It's an incredible sense of pride, and it makes you, it's a great sense of accomplishment when you can go in and do that and influence the younger generation.
Yeah. And I too feel very similarly about mentoring. I can't stress enough the level of pride when I get a message from someone saying that they've made their next accomplishment, they've set their next goal, and they're moving forward. It's a wonderful place to be. And I absolutely agree that mentoring, I think, is crucial. We should be focused on that more than we are. I think especially now, this is the time, and this show really has been my way to get the word out, to say, look, if you really want to do this because of the thrill of the polyester and the uniform, don't do it.
Right.
And that's how I try to weed out those that are coming into it for the wrong reason. But if you have a passion and you're not going to let no the first couple times dissuade you from this career, then I'm like, okay, let's talk.
Well, even, look at when I talk to particularly young kids in like say elementary school, one of the first things they ask, because they always ask the question, how much money do you make? You should never, I don't think that you should get into this profession for the money. I mean, as you know, it's been kind of a up and down, a cyclic journey as far as pay and the aviation career.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't broadcast this publicly, except for on your podcast. But really, when you look at this job, I kind of compare it to a professional athlete. We are doing something that we love to do. At least you should be in love with what you do. You really wouldn't have to pay me a lot to do it. I love the job that much. And so it's like an athlete, you love playing that sport and you do it for the love of the game. And that's what I think people should remember when they come into aviation, is do it because you love it, not because you want to get rich doing it, because you're probably not going to get rich doing it.
Right.
Well, Captain Elmer is quite an amazing individual. High caliber pilot, high caliber athlete, high caliber individual. Just one of those guys that, definitely had worked hard at what he does, and his his personality and his career and his achievements as an athlete show it. So hats off to him. He's in definitely one of the better interviews, I think, out of the 100 that we've done. And it's really awesome, and it always is awesome to listen to his stories. You'd be a great guy to fly with, because you'd never get bored listening to the stories and conversations that you'd have together. So
yeah, that's from Flight 73, Leadership, Mentorship, and Being Better. And yeah, just a fantastic experience. Thanks again, Kevin, for allowing me to interview you several times for the show. The 9/11 tribute, I thought about putting clips from that on, because we've done a 9/11 tribute every year since the launch of the Squawk Ident. I think last year's was very special. At least it was to me. We did 6 interviews of 6 captains, and we played them back on the show when we were recording. And some of them had me in tears, just because of the sheer emotional gravity of having these professional adult pilots who experienced firsthand being there and what they went through in the years to follow. And having that raw emotion come back up all these years later was very moving. I chose not to put any clips on this episode because we are running long today and short on time. But I highly recommend that the 9/11 show. The last clip I want to play is one of my favorites, because it deals with what we're trying to accomplish here. As we were speaking on the onset of this episode, we were giving examples of how a recent experience with windshear and weather events and how we handled them, and using the threat and error model, why we reacted the way we did, and all these things. It's all here to try to spread the information and make us all better. And that's really the goal. So on this last clip from Flight 86, entitled Super Critical Coverage, we interviewed a really cool guy. Pete Tendrenda was more than happy to be on the show, and I was just so grateful that he was able to join us. I first met Pete when we were flying together. He was my FO over at Sandpiper on a trip. We really hit it off. He's just a really cool guy, real laid back. And he tells a story of an emergency situation that he had over at Sandpiper and how he handled it. And it really does top off an explanation of what we're doing here on the show, which is to inform so that we can all make better choices. Here's a clip from Flight 86.
What have you had at Sandpiper? Anything that happened at Sandpiper that?
Yeah, we had a rapid decompression, actually.
Really?
At flight level 280. Yeah, coming into Miami.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've realized that things, when something goes wrong, things don't have to happen quickly. You don't have to do there's not a whole lot in an airplane or in a jet that you have to do quickly besides putting your mask on in a rapid decompression,
Exactly.
or in an explosive decompression, and but anyways, so I had a rapid decompression coming into Miami. We were doing a longer flight. I think it was somewhere in Ohio back to Miami. One of our longer flights, and it was a great time. We were having a great time. The captain and I were getting along very well, and everything was set up. And so we were flying from Cleveland, I believe, back to Miami. We just started the arrival into around Norman Beach, and at 280, the captain realized
the Highly arrival.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, one of those highly 7, 6, or whatever it is now.
Yeah.
And captain, he started freaking out. He's not freaking out, but he started pointing towards the ICAS, and we see that the cabin pressure is rising, and he immediately jumps into action, and it's rising rapidly, and we're losing pressurization. And the first thing he said, he goes, I've seen this in training. I've seen this in training. He goes, grabs his mask, puts it on, and there we go. We started our memory items, oxygen mask on, crew
on 100%.
On 100%, communication established, rapid descent as required, and so anyways, we initiated a rapid descent and or emergency descent as required. That's what it's called, emergency descent, and declared an emergency. It wasn't explosive; it was just rapid. And he was pretty excited, and which got me excited. The first thing we do is we adjust our seats. We're sitting forward, because we're sitting back, relaxed, cruising, and
you're in cruise mode.
You're in cruise mode. So we adjust our seats. We're on our way down, and I remember, he's breathing really hard, and we established crew communication. We could hear each other, and I could hear him just breathing, really heavy. And I remember looking over at him in our, we're in our descent, we're bouncing along, getting down, speed brakes are out and gears down and all that. And we're bouncing along. He's breathing really heavy. He's hand flying it, and I just looked over at him, just kind of tapped his shoulder. I said, "Hey," I go, "You all right, man?" And he looks over at me. He's like, "Yeah." I go, "All right." And we fist pounded, and then we continued. And I just had to slow him down to slow myself down, But we descended, got to we were shooting for 10. We blew through 10. I said, "Okay, we're going to level at 8." And we leveled at 8. And he was telling me to drop the mask. So in the Embraer 140, 145, the masks will deploy, I think, at 14 or 15,000 feet.
Yeah.
14. Yeah. And the cabin rate never got that high, but he was saying masks, through our oxygen masks. And I was like, "What would you like me to do?" He says, "Drop the masks," and I thought about it for a second, and I realized that, I don't know if we're going to have an explosive decompression, or if it's going to go or if it's going to
continue to climb.
Continue to climb. I don't know what's going to happen. He's asking for it. It will deploy automatically, but I said, okay. I mean, this has all happened in a matter of 2 seconds.
Sure.
Thought about it. He asked for it, thought about it, and then boom, just drop the masks, so.
Yeah.
So that was that. We landed, and that was it. We thanked everybody, on board. Yeah, we got down. Everything was good. Declared emergency and landed. And then they discovered it was leaking somewhere around the PCA, wherever they hook up the preconditioned air.
Yeah.
So.
You brought something to light that we talk about in training all the time. When you were in the middle of the emergency and you're in your emergency descent, and you said you brought your seat up, you're bouncing along, and you can hear your captain over there just breathing, and you tapped him on the shoulder, and you looked at him, and you were like, "Are you okay?" And he looked at you, he went, yeah. And then you fist bump. That's something that is awesome. We talk about that all the time. Sometimes you get so caught up in the moment, and you get like what do they call it? Tunnel focus. Is that what it's called?
Tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision, right? And you're just focused on doing the right thing perfectly, and you forget about everything else. And it happens to everybody.
Right.
And you just tapping them on the shoulder kind of brings them back to, hey, we're good. That your scan is out here now, where everybody's in the green, we call it. And we're outside of the yellow, and it didn't sound like you guys ever got in the red, which is awesome.
No.
Which is a term that we use in training. Red being you're completely clueless to what's going on. Yellow being like you're kind of tunnel vision, or you're kind of little outside of your comfort zone. And then green meaning, hey, you're with it, you're dialed in, we're doing everything properly. That's a great way to bring somebody back into the green.
Yeah,
that was cool, man. That was a great story.
That's a wonderful story.
Great job, Pete. I mean,
wow.
Talk about exactly what we're talking about here. Sharing experiences so that we could learn from them. We can put that in the back of our minds. And if that similar experience ever happens to us, as we heard the story, I remember Pete telling me that story, it'll help focus your direction so that you can have the safest possible outcome.
Yeah.
And we get to share these stories at altitude in a pressurized hollow tube, traveling 500 miles an hour, 6 miles over the surface of the earth all the time. That's what we talk about on the flight deck when we're not specifically doing a task. We share stories. We learn from them. It makes us better pilots. It makes us better aviators. It makes us better people because we hear the stories. We can be compassionate about others' experiences, and we can make ourselves better because we'll put more tools in our arsenal of tools. And when we hear stories like this from Pete, I mean, these are the highlights for me. This is what it's all about.
Definitely. What a great story Pete shared with us. Is he about to flow to Legacy? Do you know?
Well, when we were doing the podcast with him months ago, he was getting ready to upgrade.
Oh, okay.
So not quite yet. I did have a chance to hang out with one of our former guests, Nathan Day, from a podcast a few ago. Yep. Nathan and I got to hang out in Grand Rapids. I was on a layover in Grand Rapids, and that's where he lives, and I reached out to him. So we got together New Year's, actually. And he's in class right now, 7-3 FO.
Nice.
Over at Legacy Airlines. So yeah, it's kind of nice to have these pilots that we've had on the show and get to follow their journey real time. This is actually very, very amazing. Well, I'm very excited, Rob, because season 4 is looking to be really just jam-packed with interviews. I have a few interviews that are lined up for the following weeks and months. Hopefully, we can get some more podcasts out with a little bit more regularity. I know things have been crazy with schedules right now. I don't see that it's changing, but hopefully we can keep this ball rolling because I really do have a fantastic time producing these shows.
And you do a really good job at it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
It's time to put in another 100 episodes and get some more stories and some more interviews out there and share the excitement we have about podcasting and aviation.
Yeah, and thank you, Rob, for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to share this time with you. Season 4, like we mentioned, has some exciting interviews coming up, some exciting shows. What's the rest of the week looking for you, Rob?
Well, I got a trip starting tomorrow. As usual, I had to back some trips up back to back to make time for the kids' volleyball season. So we have a volleyball tournament starting on Saturday. So Saturday, Sunday, and thankfully it's local. So we don't have to travel too far for it. But got a 3-day trip coming up starting tomorrow and volleyball on the weekend. and then I get Monday off, and then head right back out for another 3-day trip starting on Tuesday. So that's what's going on, personal life and work life. Other than that, not too much, just standard, husband, daddy, workload stuff here at home with laundry and cleaning the house and car maintenance and all that stuff. So,
yeah, that's what I've been doing too. I recently bought and sold a few vehicles, and I'm working on one now.
Cool.
Got a 2007 Toyota FJ Cruiser that needs a little bit of work, and I've been going back and forth to the dealer. They know me by name at the dealer at the parts department. Luckily, I do all the work myself, and thank God that cool. I'm a bit of a mechanic. I've been turning wrenches for my dad's auto repair shop since I was a little kid, and so luckily I have the knowledge and the experience and skill set to do the work. So that's what I've been working on too. It's been taking up quite a bit of time, but soon I'll have that 3-inch lift kit, new suspension, and a new master brake cylinder, and that car will be complete.
Cool.
And
you should do a kind of like our buddy, is it John Gruber?
Oh, the YouTube or the Instagram, Lancer Legacy. Yeah.
Should do.
Well, I thought about that, but that I've been in such a rush to kind of get stuff done that I haven't set up cameras and things. But I'll definitely
just hold your iPhone there and do it. That'll be fine. Take a couple videos and put them together.
I think I will, at least from here on out, do a little bit of progress. Maybe I'll have to start on my personal Instagram page.
Yeah.
It's at Aviator Tony.
There you go.
On Instagram. But anyway, I just want to say thanks again for joining us for the last 100 episodes. And we look forward to having everyone join us on this journey as we continue forward. Please help us by sharing this podcast online and with your friends. Be sure to subscribe or follow the Squawk Ident podcast on whatever platform you are listening on. We also love receiving listener feedback. You can send us an email or even audio feedback via our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha, Victor, the number 8, Romeo, Tango, Oscar, November, Yankee.com. There you'll find audio archives, photos from the flight line, guest book photo tab, our Squawk Ident pilot shop, where you can find an assortment of t-shirts, hats, mugs, and much, much more. Small proceeds from every sale goes towards helping to finance this podcast. You can also contribute financially to our program right from our homepage on the website. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can find us under Squawk Ident Podcast or Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident Podcast. So, one big final thank you to Rob D for joining us today, and thank you to you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other.
See ya.
Bye, y'all. Damn.
Woodpecker.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know anything about planes?
fly this airplane and land it?
No, not a chance. No, not a chance. No, 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 not a chance.
Roger. Huh?
Roger. All right. Request vector. Over. What?
Do you know anything about planes?
Clearance, Clarence. Roger, Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Elite. Best of the best. We'll make you better. We'll make you better.
Do you know anything about planes?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, you kill me. You really do.
Do you know anything about planes?
Captain, how soon can you land? I can't tell. You can tell me, I'm a doctor. No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Do you know anything about planes?
Can you fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying. Do you know anything about planes?